Penguin Random House Audio presents Dead Money, a novel by Jakob Kerr. Read for you by Rachel Music. Prologue. Tony found the body on a Tuesday. The shift began like any other. Tony rolled his custodial station across the carpet, wheels echoing in the deserted office. Standing desks lurked to either side, chairs abandoned. Whiteboards sat clustered with unfinished ideas, post-its scattered in rainbows of paper buckshot. The conference rooms were shadowed and vacant. The designer sofas were unoccupied. The craft beer taps were covered. The ping-pong tables were pingless. The arcade games were unplugged, the movie theaters shuttered, the alternative milk frothers cleaned and dormant. Even the ball pit was empty. Tony was surrounded by black Apple monitors. Their quiet faces stared back at him, eerie and reflective in the soft darkness. It was 2:36 a.m. During the day, Tony imagined Journey's headquarters abuzz with energy, an idealistic thrum of 20-something tech workers. But now the building was a mausoleum. There was something distinctly ominous about the quiet of an office at night. The silence felt heavier in a place that was normally full of life. Mind blank, body on autopilot, Tony stepped to the next workstation and executed his straightforward list of tasks. 1. Push the chair under the desk. 2. Clean up leftover food. Empty mason jars of kombucha, crumbs of Journey's house-made vegan cookies. 3. And most important, don't touch anything else. Tony moved to the desk and grabbed a plate. Its porcelain was smeared with the remnants of chicken parm. Tony shook it into the trash can on his station. He dropped the plate and utensils into a plastic tub. Then he glanced at the rest of the desk. The gargantuan monitor was caked with dust, edges festooned with nonsensical stickers. A heap of papers was strewn across the composite work surface. Even the chair, a fuselage of webbed plastic that cost $2,800, Tony had looked it up, was askew, one of its many adjustment knobs dangling from the socket. The scene was crying out for Tony's custodial services. Even a single squeeze of the spray bottle would work wonders. But Tony didn't give it a second look. Methodically, he moved back to his cart and rolled on to the next. 141 down, 170 to go. Journey's facilities team was adamant about the rules for Tony and his colleagues. Push in the chair. Clean up the food. Otherwise, don't touch a thing. Nothing. Don't touch any papers on the desks, even if wadded up. They could be vital technological specs. Don't adjust a chair's settings when you move it back into place. Software engineers are incredibly specific about their ergonomics. And under no circumstances, never, ever even think about touching a keyboard. Not that Tony cared. He'd worked in every type of office there was. Most of them had peculiarities. If anything, Journey's rules just made the job easier. When Tony had started working Journey's offices, he'd assumed it was the same as the rest of the startups. Slick app, cartoony logo, rich white kid at the top. But Tony had learned that Journey was a little different from the others. It was flush with cash, even by San Francisco standards. Tony had worked in a lot of nice tech offices, but Journey took the opulence to another level. More surprising was the way that Journey had seeped into Tony's everyday landscape. He saw the company's green go-karts and bikes all over the Bay Area, even out by his sister's place in Fremont. Their ads were inescapable, on BART, on TV, on the web. And Tony had never met Journey's CEO, but he saw the guy's face everywhere. Magazine covers, local news, and, of course, pasted all over this very office. None of that really mattered to Tony's job, of course. But he wondered if the company would stick around longer than some of the others. 162 down, 149 to go. Journey's headquarters were organized in the open plan style that had become default in San Francisco. It was an airy, post-industrial warehouse space. Workstations were placed in long, orderly rows. The layout was all right angles and straight lines, easy to navigate. Tony took a familiar path as he rolled through the desks, completing his tasks at an unhurried pace. Empty a beer glass. Scrape kale chips off a desk. Push in the chair. Next. After the desks, Tony moved to the kitchen on his floor. He took a rag over the broad recycled glass counters, swiping it between the gleaming taps, past the bowls of fresh fruit, over the Italian espresso machine. He dusted the enormous pantry shelves, bins full of gourmet snacks with whimsical Journey-branded names. Go Your Own Way granola. Off the Beaten Trail mix. Tony checked his watch. 3:25 a.m. Time to move. Tony pushed his station down a wide hallway, heading toward his final task of the night. Journey's offices were organized around an atrium that ran vertically through the center of the building. Tony moved along one edge of the atrium, glancing over the waist-high glass that ran alongside. From here, he could look down into the central courtyard. During daylight hours, the courtyard was the hub of Journey's headquarters, a broad plaza filled with tables, plants, artwork, and the steady buzz of optimistic conversation. Now, like the rest of the building, the atrium slumbered. A full moon filtered through the retractable glass ceiling, bathing the courtyard in an ethereal glow. Tony looked for his colleagues on the lower floors, but saw no one. Tony moved to a back corner of the building, pushing his station toward a single, inconspicuous elevator. The elevator was plain and unmarked, as though it had been purposely tucked out of the way. The only sign of its important destination was the portrait that hung next to it. Trevor Cannon's face stared back at Tony in the dark. Cannon was the CEO and founder of Journey. If the magazine covers were to be believed, he was the visionary force behind the hottest startup on the planet. Every single piece of the company fell under Cannon's domain, from the desks and taps that Tony had just spent 2 hours cleaning out to the green bicycles that now dotted his sister's neighborhood. All of it traced back to one man. Even the ping-pong balls, Tony thought. Cannon's portrait expression was stoic. His black hair cut short. His skin was pale and ghostly, calling attention to his bright blue eyes. They beamed out from the portrait with a strange intensity. Tony found himself staring at the portrait for longer than he intended. He'd always found it unsettling. Cannon's eyes felt like Tony's only companion in the deserted office, their cold, iridescent blue cutting like ice through the surrounding darkness. Tony checked his watch. It was 3:30 exactly. He pressed the call button. After a moment, the doors opened, and Tony rolled his station inside, grabbing a badge that dangled at his waist. The badge was part of Tony's additional security protocol. It only activated the elevator for a narrow sliver of time, 3:30 a.m. to 3:35 a.m. Tony swiped the badge over a black card reader. It flashed green and beeped, the ping echoing in the quiet office. The doors closed. The elevator rose smoothly. It brought Tony to the most secluded part of Journey's headquarters. The 6th floor was a cube-shaped barnacle of steel and glass affixed to one quadrant of the building's roof. It housed Trevor Cannon's private office and a small foyer. Outside lay a lavish roof deck replete with hot tub, wet bar, fire pit, and propane grill. Tony heard that Cannon referred to it as his sanctuary. The doors opened, and Tony stepped into the sanctuary's modest foyer. The ceiling was painted in bright Journey green. The floor was polished hardwood. To Tony's right, floor-to-ceiling glass treated him to a dazzling view of downtown San Francisco, a tableau of shadowed light clouded in the fog. Straight ahead, Cannon's office was guarded by a tall door of privacy glass. Through the frost, Tony saw light glowing in Cannon's office. A sliver of yellow spilled out from the door's edges. Tony's orders for cleaning Trevor Cannon's private sanctuary were explicit. If the light in Cannon's office was off, Tony was free to execute a short checklist of tasks. But Cannon pulled the occasional all-nighter. Under absolutely no condition was Tony to disturb him. If Tony saw light in Cannon's office, his orders were ironclad. Get back on the elevator and leave. In practice, this happened rarely. Tony had only seen it twice during his time on the job. Tonight made 3. Tony's body began.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?